All right, we're back. And today, another awesome coach with us, Lauren Melton of This Life Uncluttered, um, weight loss coach for women, former HR executive who lost 70 pounds by herself, and now teaches everybody to do it. Lauren and I met in online trainer mentorship, bunch of coaches, and just are kind of kindred spirits in the way that we think about a lot of things. I think second careers in this and work with parents and both in New England. And just been really fun to get to know Lauren. So excited to have her on today to chat.
Yeah, Jeff, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you. I could tell you were also from New England when
Yeah,
we were in the group together. I was like,
very
great.
very early on. All you got to do is just drop a wicket, and everybody's like, "Yeah, got to get some dunks. You'll get it's wicket hot out, guy." So, want to start with this, Lauren, because you just said this the other day, and if anybody's watching on Spotify or YouTube, you can see behind Lauren her color coordinated books, which is perfect because it's so much of your brand is, and I think part of your story as well is it's uncluttering, right? Like it's we live in as parents and just people, like we're constantly barraged with, I don't know if that's the right word,
Mhm.
whatever, with stuff, right? That's social media and it's all these things. And there's so much and figuring out what are we going to do with our fitness, what works, what doesn't work. They all combine or collide and conflict and all of these things. And so trying to figure out like the simplification of life a little bit and allowing space to do what it is that we want to do. Can you just big picture, 30,000 feet view, what is uncluttering? Where did you start with that? And why is that kind of the bedrock of what it is that you do?
Yeah, I love that you use the word space
Mm-hmm.
also because that's such a big part of it, physically and mentally, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
having the space and the time to show up for ourselves continually.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a newer coach. I've been a coach for a couple of years. As you mentioned previously, I was head of HR and software tech startups, so totally different life.
Yeah.
And I started an Instagram page for fun when COVID hit. I literally have no idea why. I was probably just having a really bad work day and needed some type of like break from it. And I just started sharing more about my life. And a lot of that was about how I had simplified my life and how I had kind of organized it in a way to make it easy for me to show up. I also started sharing about my health journey. I have lost over 75 pounds over 8 years and maintaining that. Again, this is before I was even a coach,
Mm-hmm.
and just started sharing about that. And it started resonating, particularly with a lot of other busy moms like myself.
Mm-hmm.
I quickly realized that that's where it was all about was that I was able to show up for myself, to do those things, to be able to, keep track of my nutrition and my workouts because each day I had less decisions to make. I had, all less of this mental clutter and anxiety like weighing me down. Now I work with, women one-on-one and in group settings. And this is what I see time and time again, like parents, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's so much to overwhelm us every day, all these thousands of little decisions from like, what are we going to eat for dinner? What did we pack the kids' lunches? Like, who did he sign the permission slips for school? And tack on work to that. Like, my team have all their deliverables and everything else. So overwhelmed that it can feel like there's no space for us, right? Or no time for us to be able to show up for ourselves. So every little thing we can do to like eliminate those decisions, those thousands of decisions that we
Yeah.
make every day, it frees space for us to be able to feel like we can actually show up. Because you know this as a coach, and people think there's a secret, right? But it's
Mm-hmm.
literally the boring basics, right?
Yeah.
Like there's no secret. It's being able to keep doing those boring basics every day. So when you
Mm-hmm.
have less decisions, you can do that.
Well, they feel boring when like if things that feel boring to us and when your life when you have the space to do it feels not boring and feels like a task and
Mhm.
challenging when so like for you I would imagine that like as long as you've been doing it tracking your food is boring and not at all challenging but when you have a gajillion things on your mind like I think you and I have had a thousand clients who've said like it's just too much for me. Like I don't
So
have the
overwhelming.
bandwidth to, it's overwhelming to track my food. And whether or not you track your food is, you can or don't have to. Like it's, but if tracking your food is overwhelming, then we may want to uh be bring some awareness to why is taking the 30 seconds to plug something in to an app that's doing it basically for you, why is that too much with your life?
Absolutely. And part of it is too, like just feeling so frozen to take action because
Yeah.
of all these things happening around us, right? Like if you get home from work, you get the papers all over the counter from the kids' school bags, and you've got the mail that's like piling up, and like forgot to defrost the chicken for dinner, and
Yeah.
all these things. All of a sudden it's like the idea of like, oh, you want me to, I have to measure and weigh my food now? Forget it. Like
Yeah.
it's,
There are
that's been
children
so
screaming at me like
right.
I cannot weigh the food.
Right. So ways to make it easier, like just to
Yeah.
simplify your day to day so that you can feel like those things can feel less overwhelming. All of those little things, the mail, the clutter on the
Mhm.
counter, the, what you're going to eat for dinner, all of it.
Well, it's like my wife and I'll have moments like this, and I think we still have them. I think everybody has them, but it's like the restaurant phrase of "in the weeds," right? Like I'm in the weeds. Like I'm overwhelmed with all that needs to get done that I get so frozen that I can't do even the most basic thing. Like, and she'll oftentimes get this with her photography. Like, she's a wedding photographer, and she'll like she did last winter. She's like, or last fall, she's like, I'll never do this again. She did weddings on back to back days. She did a
Oh,
Friday
wow.
wedding and a Saturday wedding. And so, one, it's like the going and shooting the wedding, but there's also the deliverables from the wedding. You want to send a sneak peek and follow up and do the edits. And she's like, I I have so much to do. I can't, and she's a teacher too. So like Monday, she went back to school full time, and it was yes, she's a superhero. We
I
tout
was going
Megan's
to say
praises. Yeah, we tout Megan's praises on this podcast. But that it is. It's just like I don't even know where to start because I have my to do list is seven. It's so long that I can't even write it out.
absolutely. That's a huge part of it. That's something I focus on with my clients on specifically is like making sure they have the skills and feel confident in terms of how they approach their schedule for the week. Like, and
Mm-hmm.
I work with a lot of like very seasoned executives, and I work with nurses and doctors and lawyers, and very impressive, like lots of different careers.
Yeah.
But even so, some of them are still feeling like they don't have the skills to look at their week and schedule it in a way that's going to allow them to like reduce some of that anxiety. And so even things like helping them learn how to time block and like how to
Mm.
go about that with work and at home, in a way that they can, just again reduce some of that stress and anxiety every week.
100%. Have you seen? There was a video a little while ago that went pretty bonkers all over the place. But there was a mom who like it was the train of thought where she was like walking
Yeah.
through the house. Did you see this one where she like I went to get a snack and then I opened the fridge and I realized that this wasn't there, and so that I went over there and then I saw that the dishwasher wasn't empty, but I opened it up and then I realized oh the laundry would needed to get done, and I went in here and I realized that there wasn't any detergent, so then I go to Amazon to order it, and then I realized that there was a message from the kids' school, so then and it was, how did you end up here? And he's like, I don't know, and now I'm hungry again, like back to the beginning of, and it's cyclical with this. And I think that that's the experience of, I think, for a lot of people, but particularly with parents, where like you're not just responsible for you, but you're responsible for one or multiple other lives, where you're running their life because they can't, and it's just like it's just shutdown mode, because it's like I've been running on, it's a car running on 7,000 RPMs for an hour and a half, and it's just like the engine goes, nah, that's about enough of that.
Oh, for sure. And when you mention shutdown, I mean, I talk a lot with my clients about the nervous system.
Mm,
Like a lot of us think, oh, it's, I don't have the willpower, or I just need to convince myself mentally that I should be able to do these things and show up for myself. There's something wrong with me if I can't. but it's actually that their body, like physically, isn't allowing them to do it because it's
Mm-hmm.
in such a state of either fight, flight, freeze, whatever mode, because of all this. So yeah, there's a lot to it. And society doesn't make it easy on us, for sure, right? You know this as yourself, and as you described your
Yeah.
wife's job, 2 jobs, and you have 3 kids, right? And
Yeah. Yeah, we do.
3 kids, 2 twins, 2 twins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Twins. Yeah.
So yeah, yours are younger than mine. So
Yeah.
it's there's so much there, and it's not easy, especially when you're trying to build these habits in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And even I have clients that come and they actually have some really solid habits in place, but they're frustrated with their lack of
Mm-hmm.
results that they want to achieve, but they're still overwhelmed too. So ways that I can help them to
Yeah.
create like efficiencies and rituals that just happen more on autopilot. So it's
Yeah.
easier to show up every day. That makes it easier to keep it up, for sure.
I definitely want to get into those, but this idea of autopilot is, I think, worth exploring before we kind of go into that next stage, which is like I've said before, like the idea of like fish don't do well out of water. Like if the environment is set up for your success, you will be successful. If your environment is not set up for your success, you are going to be working a lot harder than you need to. Than if you had just taken the time to set up the environment first. So like being able to show up and run on autopilot. So for you or for your clients, but like early on for you and your journey, as you started this kind of uncluttering journey, what were some of the things that you started to do or you do early on with your clients so that are like, hey, this is kind of bang for your buck to start to make something be basically, I don't have to think, I just show up and do it.
Yeah, I'm a big James Clear fan, Atomic
Mm-hmm.
Habits.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, a lot of those principles that you've got it right there, don't you? Yeah.
I do.
It's like my Bible.
Not color coordinated, but it's right there. Yeah.
So using a lot of the principles he recommends, I, kind of depending on where each client is at, but helping them kind of come up with ways to take action. Because again, everyone thinks it's this elusive motivation, right? This
Mm-hmm.
elusive motivation that you either have or don't have. And the more I can help them recognize it's just those small actions, and how do you keep repeating those small actions over time until it does just become autopilot. And it takes time. Someone was recently saying like it can take like a year to like really form a habit. And like that's why I tell clients, like, you got to give yourself grace and be patient in the process. But like habit stacking is a great one. So if there's something you're already doing, so let's say something is, we may think is simple, but it's not always for everyone. And it is so critical. Hydration, like just making sure we're getting enough water. This is one basic I always start out with my clients on. If they're already doing other things, how can they stack that on so that it happens more like with their cup of coffee or when they brush their teeth or, whatever it is. So taking approaches like that. I also think it has to be fun. Like sometimes we forget this piece so much that like in order to want to keep doing something, you have to figure out how to make it fun. And, people may not think meal planning is fun or, the workouts, even that may not seem fun at first. So how can you like add something to it? I'm a coach and I will admit I hate HIIT workouts. I hate them with a passion. Give me a strength training workout anytime. So, but I know they're good for me. I try to do it once a week if I get myself there. I get myself there by watching my stupid reality TV show while I do it. So those type of things to, get yourself showing up, I think are really important.
That's interesting. So like, again, something that kind of building off of that, I think oftentimes we try to work backward from the solution versus forward from the problem. Like the idea of I want to build this idealistic life, like we have because we're constantly bombarded with it. Like, oh, I ought to be doing X, Y, Z, and we try to work. Like, I need to make it look like this versus starting with where we are, habit stacking, and making small changes or adding to where we currently are. Hey, this is where I'm at. Let me move forward from there and build up toward something where then all of a sudden, hey, is this actually the idealistic lifestyle? And if it is, then I'm within shouting distance of it versus trying to work backward from something that I'm not quite ready for.
Absolutely. And I think along the way, there's these things that are so critical with it too. Like when you're just saying that, the first thing that came to mind to me was, if someone is trying to increase their steps and they're, oh, I heard 10K is what we all should do, which
Yeah.
that's not necessarily true, and they're maybe only at like 2 or 3K, that is going to seem so far off
Yeah.
to them that it's going to be discouraging, and they're going to be like, forget this, I can never do this. So, setting a goal, interim goals that will help them to be able to get there along the way, starting smaller. And then also like having them celebrate along the way. So I'm sure you do this with your clients, but like having them celebrate and recognize a win. It doesn't matter how small it is, right? If they have a week where they feel like nothing was successful, I'm going to go back and be like, that just can't be. There has to have been something that was a win, and helping them find that, and then help them recognize that you can still have this goal out that seems so far off out here, and keep working towards it, but also like celebrate and recognize what you've already done here. Because if you don't do that, like you're gonna not be able to continue to show up for yourself every day. And you can do both of those at the same time. I have to remind myself with my business this all the time.
I think, you and I both have moments because there's always going to be somebody further ahead of you. There's always the like what I think I ought to be doing, and we can create unrealistic expectations for ourselves. The idea that, oh, I didn't hit whatever, so like I'll make this year in terms of revenue for my business. There are coaches in OTM that will make this month. You know what I mean? Like they will bring in that much revenue this month, which is just, it blows my mind. But if I am living with an expectation that like that's what's considered success, and anything short of that is failure, as if it's pass fail, then I'm set up for disappointment. And if I'm feeling disappointed, even though I might be, I'll pull this up. I got two things right here because I just did this yesterday. So I know this cycle here, right? The actions, results, motivation thing. So my big thing recently has been, you can be taking all the right actions, but if you're not drawing attention to the results that you're getting, then you're going to not get the motivation as the byproduct, right? So action leads to results, which leads to motivation, which leads to further action. That's the cycle. But if we only have one result as like, this is the result that I expect, and if I don't get that, then I failed. If I'm not drawing attention to the results of my actions, if I'm taking good actions, then it's going to be harder for me to continue to be motivated to take those actions.
For sure. This is when you have to like zoom out, right? And we get so laser focused on these little things we didn't do, or the things that felt like we screwed up. But when you zoom out, can look at it and look at the evidence. I always tell my clients this, like the evidence to like show you, the actions you've taken, the results that you've had. But sometimes it does require zooming out to see that.
Yeah, I think Dre said on the podcast, she said it really well. I think she said something along the lines of, believe the evidence you generate about your own life. And I was like, that was really well said, which is like, I mean, if you've lost 5 pounds in 8 weeks, it means you're doing something right.
For sure.
It might not be the 16 pounds that you thought you were going to lose, but you're doing something right. Maybe there's a little bit more that we could do, right? Like we can use this as information, but like you're not screwing it up, like we're heading in the right direction. So when you think about hydration and habit stacking and things like that, so when you started, so going back to like COVID, Unclutter, starting the Instagram page, and even your journey of 75 pounds when you first started, what were some of the first things that you started to do that were like, okay, making this change or eliminating this decision moved the needle for me in terms of my ability to swim, to go back to my earlier analogy.
So when I started my like wellness journey, weight loss journey, I was not a coach. So this, so I did a lot of what everyone typically does. And, now I look back, I kind of probably wasn't efficient with how I could have done things. But I learned so much from that. So, I tried all the latest fads or what was working for everyone else. And when I finally got onto a path that felt sustainable, again, I go back to the boring basics, but it was about learning that, like, oh, it's actually just figuring out how to keep doing the things over and over. It's not about being so intense for a period of time with something I can't maintain. It's about learning how to do these things that just become part of who I am. And I think once I learned how to self identify as an active person, when I
Mm-hmm.
was able to like have this identity of someone who balanced their nutrition, when I was someone who could, go to social events and didn't have to have alcohol, that it wasn't part of who I was anymore. Those were the things that changed it for me. So I think it was that self identity piece. And it took time. I didn't have that easily first 4 or 5 years. It's been the last, like, I'd say 3, 4 years where I really felt and owned that. And so I'd say that was probably the key for me.
Identifying yourself as somebody who does these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's what's allowed me to be able to continue to show up and do them. And I see when I work with clients who have that identity built, um, it goes a lot faster for them. The ones, the women who come to work with me and already have a lot of like things in place, but are frustrated about one aspect, but they're already pretty active and they already identify as an active person. Other clients who come to work with me, and they don't have that self identity built yet around it, it just takes more time, right? And it takes a lot of deep reflection, and which is not always necessarily easy
No.
to do, to really question some of those beliefs, those limiting self beliefs we have. I for years was, and when I kind of put my weight on, mine wasn't baby weight, so I gained it after having my kids. I was actually at like my thinnest weight probably after having my second son. But it was then when life happened. I was, getting promoted at work, and I was, commuting 2 hours a day in the car, and I was, prioritizing a lot of things that, outside of activity,
Mm-hmm.
and not definitely not around nutrition. But I thought, like, well, busy, successful working moms, they don't work out. Like, I was
Mm-hmm.
convinced of that.
Yeah.
I said they didn't really, that must be nice for them. Those people who they have time, like, well, they don't really care about their career. All these things I
Mm-hmm.
told myself, I was convinced that, oh, well, that'll be later. I'll figure that out later once they're older, or I'll figure that out, once I get to a certain point in my career. Quickly, my body told me otherwise. My body started to fail me and I started to have pain. And I was in my like early to mid 30s. And that was the wake up call I needed to be like, start questioning some of that and realize that, like, those self beliefs I had were holding me back, and weren't going to support me to be present with my kids in the way I wanted to be.
The idea of limiting beliefs, I think that you and I see these probably more than almost anybody, is like the lies that we tell ourselves. So this
Mm.
is in contradiction to the evidence that is true about ourselves, right? The lies that we tell ourselves about ourselves, which is I can't, I won't, I'm unable to, this isn't who I am. So the idea though of identifying yourself and combating those limiting beliefs is, hey, I am a certain way. So somebody who doesn't have that belief about themselves, you didn't have that belief about yourself early on, how did you go about, or how do you go about with clients, like kind of developing that identity of and combating those limiting beliefs that we're coming into it with? Because it is, you're right, it is absolutely as easier as like, hey, I'm an active person, I'm a fit person, even though, like, even if, like, it's almost easier even if the evidence doesn't suggest that, right? But you're like, I am this person. It's a little bit easier for that person to be like, I haven't really dialed it in yet, right? It's just a matter of the mechanics of it versus like, I'm not this person. Then we're doing something that feels foreign to us as a human being. So how do you kind of go about building that identity?
Yeah, I think this is where you have to have some type of like reflection process involved. So sure, it's good to track our data and, to be able to have that evidence that we talked about already previously. So you can go back to that when you're frustrated. If you're, not seeing the scale move or not seeing something happen, you can really go back and be like, well, you're not actually in a calorie deficit, Lauren, so things like that.
Yeah.
But having also the ability to like have some type of self-reflection, whether you do it on your own or whether you do it with a coach, where how did you feel in those moments? Like, what was that like? What was, what was holding you back? And just kind of having that opportunity to do that. That's where I think it helped me to see when that was happening. For instance, if, I used to be, I thought I was a social drinker, but it turns out I was a heavy drinker.
I socially drink heavily.
I really thought that's just how everybody lived.
I'm a very social person. Yeah.
And now I have a couple drinks a year. And that's like mind boggling to people who knew me, have known me my entire life. So I get asked about that a lot. And I think part of it was, in those, when I questioned those, like, oh, I couldn't go out to dinner and not have a glass of wine, or I couldn't go to an event and not drink at it. One, start to like process, how did that feel in those moments? Right. And to like, actually, have that reflection piece to be like, what was my body sending me messages, that like, why, like, physically feeling uncomfortable in those settings. And then I had to challenge myself to try it. Right. Like I had to like, be like, listen, you need to like put yourself into these settings. I ask my clients to experiment. I would say, let's experiment with this, to be uncomfortable and to like put yourself in those settings to test it out and see what it's like. Cause again, until you start like taking those actions, it's never gonna get there. But so it's not easy for sure if you don't have that identity, but when you can look at the evidence that you see once you have done some of these things, when you can experiment with it and put yourself into these uncomfortable settings, I think eventually over time, the more you do it, the more evidence you have of it, then you can like go back to it and say like, well, look, you actually did it last Friday night. You like went to, this event and didn't.
You survived. Yeah.
Yeah. You got through it. But it's, there has to be some type of catalyst for like the action. And a lot of times that's not something I can actually, I don't know what the word is, but like, I can't convince my clients to have that. Yeah. It has to happen on their own almost. Right. Yeah. And a lot of it happens before they reach out to me, and that like reaching out to me is that like tipping point of like, I'm so frustrated. Yeah. But you have to it's almost like you have to hit rock bottom in some aspects to be like, I feel so miserable that I need to take some type of action, because who I am today is not where I want to be.
You're forced into it by circumstances a little bit. So like what I was thinking about, and I've talked about this before, which is like, I think parenting is this, right? Like so one of my best friends, she's been a mom since she was like 10 years old, right? Like she is like identified, like she was always going to be a wife and a mother. And she, she ran a daycare out of her. She just finished this daycare out, but she has 4 kids of her own, and she would watch 3 other kids by herself every day. And I'm like, what? For like 12 hours. I'm like, what is that? What is that? I can't even fathom that. Right. But so she's always been that. She's had that identity. on the other hand, I didn't feel like a dad right away. Like, the kid comes out, I'm looking at him. I'm like, this is my son. But I'm like, I'm not a dad. Like, I'm, like, are you sure they're going to send me home from the hospital? Like, I'm not qualified to do this. But then, like, you feed him and change him and wake up in the middle of the night. And, like, you start doing things that a dad would do. And all of a sudden, I start to feel more like dad. And I'm sure that you can talk about this as your kids are further along. But, like, if you dropped new dad Jeff, like April 2020 Jeff, into current Jeff's dadding situation with a 4-year-old and twin 2.5-year-olds, he would die. Like he would quite simply be dead. Because I wouldn't have built up that identity. And this is a lot harder situation than the one newborn in COVID where I didn't have to go to work. Like, it's a very different scenario. And so starting in sort of a safe environment with, like, I'm forced to do the thing kind of lower stakes, lower barrier to entry, and like, oh, I was okay. And then I feel little like that action results motivation thing, but also like be do have. Like I do the thing to become the person who has the result. And I think that what you're talking about there, that's immediately what I thought of.
Absolutely. That resonates so much as a parent. And so true. And I think the other piece of it is just like when you start to feel better, you want more and more of that. I mean,
Yeah.
there's nothing better than when like your body feels better, you mentally feel better. Oh, my cat is about to come in the
You're
picture.
good.
And
There's been 7 flies around my head this entire time.
okay.
I'm like, if you see me swatting at them, they've been here for like a week. I don't know how to get them out of here. I gotta buy a
It's
fly
that time
swatter.
of year for sure here. But yeah, when you're taking these actions that help you to feel better, and some of it happens pretty darn quickly.
Yeah.
Like, you know, when you start to change some of the foods you eat and you remove some of the like, you know, I mean, we all are going to have processed foods, but when you start to remove some of them, or if you're a soda drinker and you start to like remove some of it, you may start to feel that within weeks and start to feel better. You know, it's not a matter of months. Now the scale and things like that may feel like it's going too slow over time, but I don't know. I just think I love when I hear from clients and from my own experience, when you start to feel better, you're going to want to keep doing those things and doing them over and over because you feel so great. And sometimes you didn't even know how horrible you felt when you were in it.
Yeah. You don't know what you don't know. Yeah. Motivation is totally a momentum game. You know, like, hey, I got a little taste of it and it starts to feel good. It's like, oh, what? Like the first time you wake up not hungover
Right.
after something, you're like, oh, that's fantastic.
Right. Well, I remember, now you have younger kids. There's nothing worse than waking up hungover with kids, with babies and
Oh
toddlers.
dear.
Like,
I never did that, but that sounds like the worst thing in the world.
yeah, I can't believe I did it more than once.
Yeah, that I feel like even one time, I feel hungover just when I wake up in the morning with kids. Sometimes I'm like, I stayed up later than 9:30. I feel
Right. And all of
hungover.
a
Like I'm
sudden,
like, oh my goodness, I can't wrap my head around that. But yeah, the idea of like, hey, what is it? You start to become more of that person because you're like, I like who that person, because that's the have part of it, right? I become the person who does the things, and so I have the results. Like, why do people like being fit? It's like, oh, it feels pretty good to like be fit, you know. And
oh
the
yeah.
flip side of it is you see people who are not that way get angry at people who are, right? Because those are the people who don't have that identity. Like you see, I don't remember who it is, but there's this mom on the internet who I see all the time, and I don't follow her, but like she just pops up on my For You page. It's like, mom of 4 boys, like how I conquer the world. I don't know if you've seen this woman, but
Mm-mm.
she's fantastic. But like she's a superhero. She's like stay-at-home mom with 4 kids, and like she does more in the first 4 hours of the day than I've done in my lifetime. Like all you have to do is go in the comments and you're like, this is unrealistic. Like you can never, you know what I mean? And it's just people who like don't have that identity versus you see the other people who are like the people who are actually going to be like, hey, what's that workout program that you're doing? Or what are you doing for hydration? Like, I like that, you know, like I want to do more of that. And it's so interesting to see the dichotomy between the identities.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think 10 years back and what I felt like waking up each morning, I had back pain, I had knee pain. I'm older now and I feel way better than I did then. So you want to keep doing more and more of that. But you're right. I mean, I have friends, I have
Mm.
family who literally say like, I see your stories every morning, Lauren, it's so inspiring, but like, I have no idea how you do that. So yeah, it's
Mm.
definitely, you know, if you don't have that identity piece there, it can feel like a major uphill battle for sure.
Well, and it seems foreign. Like it seems like you get people who are like, oh, tracking your food seems. Yeah, you get people who are like claiming. You know, you get the far extreme. Like that's like
Obsessive,
an eating
restrictive.
disorder. Yeah, like this is not a healthy thing. And you're like, okay, that's maybe a little step. Or like even in I don't think we talked about this, but like the idea of decluttering is like you shared the other day that you wear the same shirt basically every day, but it's like it's different colors and different patterns,
Mhm.
whatever it is. But it's like I don't have to think anymore about what I'm going to wear. I wake up, I grab one of my shirts. I like how they feel. I like how how they fit and it's comfortable, and I don't have to think. And people like I'm sure you got some people who are like, that is so foreign to me. And even if they didn't say it, they're like, that's so weird. Like you get, because, but those are the people who aren't necessarily seeing success in the other areas. It's like, hey, if you want this, you have to be willing to do what that person is doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And the shirt thing sounds like a silly one, but I don't know if men experience this as much as women, but especially when I used to actually have to wear
Yeah.
clothes to go into an office and things like that.
Yeah.
I used to stare into the closet for
Mm.
like a long period of time and like debate and we'd try a million things on and like how much time I wasted, or then shopping, returning things, this or that, over like just such a waste of time. So all those things we can do to just like simplify and remove a lot of the unnecessary like noise in our head, right? So that we, can actually show up and focus for our, spend our time where we want to spend it. And maybe that's not working out, but like whatever that time is for people, having that ability to do that, then you're in control, right? Then that's freedom. So.
Yeah. Freedom. Oh, that's going to be where we spend the rest of it. But I did do that though. That was when I was teaching. That was, I didn't stare into the closet, but like I did the same thing that you're kind of doing, where I was like, every pair of pants went with every shirt, went with basically every pair of shoes. Now, some of them went better than others, but like I didn't have to, like I could have walked into my closet with my eyes closed and pull out any shirt, any pair of pants, and any pair of shoes, and I would be fine. There's better ones, certainly, but it was 5 pairs of pants, 7 shirts, and 6 pairs of shoes. And it was just like, okay, that was one of the math problems that I did for my students. I was like, how many different outfits can I put together without repeating myself with this? And it was like, they were like, oh my gosh, it was a lot. Or the idea that people are like, how do you eat the same things almost every day? So I'll let you go there, because that is, because I have a strong thought on it, but I'll let you riff on it and then we'll
go. So one, I think it's important for clients to learn, and you have to have food variety, right? You want to make sure you're getting enough micronutrients, macronutrients, and that you're, and you can simplify your approach to like making sure you are eating the right things to fuel your body and to feel good, that you enjoy, with having less decisions if you are not changing it every single meal, right? And so there's ways that you can approach that, and different things I help clients with, and things like having theme nights for dinner, right? So you don't have to literally like recreate, and Taco Tuesday, right? Like a lot of us do this already without even realizing it. Have breakfast for dinner, whatever it is. But when you have these kind of templates that work for you, so maybe you don't have the same exact yogurt bowl every morning, but I've got my base, and I change it up by having this kind of, I have a different fruit with it, but I always have a fruit with it, and I have some type of healthy fat, or maybe sometimes that's the yogurt itself, or other times I add some like almonds to it, or that kind of thing. But having a template to work off of, so you're not constantly having to reinvent the wheel. I think, again, that's just another area where you can reduce the decisions you make every day. And like, we eat multiple times a day, every day, right? And when people come to me,
don't be surprised.
Most people, not everyone, but a lot of clients who come to work with me, they'll say, "Oh, the workout, that getting myself to work out isn't the challenge. Like, it's the nutrition piece." And that's not the case for everyone, but it's the case for a lot of people. And I said, "Yeah, well, that makes sense. Like, we're like bombarded by so many, so much, opportunity for it to feel like we're not in control, or to like navigate it. And again, society doesn't make that necessarily easy on us either. So."
No, but the idea that like there's no worse feeling than like when we come home, like this was last night, the way that the week is, what are we going to have for dinner, and we have no food in the house? Like there's like, you're screwed. Like the decision has been made for you. Like you are host. But like, why are we surprised that we have to make dinner tonight? Like we've had dinner every Thursday forever. Like we always have to have dinner. So like, why is this news to me that like I have to like? So the idea of like, people are like, how do you eat the same breakfast every day? It's like, well, I wake up and I'm basically still asleep because it's 4:30 in the morning. I don't cold plunge or whatever it is to wake myself up. Like I wake up, I come downstairs, I have a glass of water, and then I make my breakfast. And I'm basically still asleep. And at the same time I'm making breakfast, I'm also making lunches for 3 kids and
Yep.
packing up for the day and making sure my calendar's all set and all of these things as I'm doing this. So I need to be able to do this with my eyes closed, not paying attention. I need to be able to know that it's quality, know that I'm going to enjoy it to some degree, and move on with the rest of my day.
Right.
And so it's like, it's good. I enjoy it and I don't have to think. But the other part of it is this, and this is my one that I like, where people are like, I can't eat the same thing every day. I'm like, you eat the same thing every day. It's just a bacon, egg, and cheese from Dunkin' Donuts on the way to work.
That's so true.
Or it's a bowl of cereal. Like I had a bowl of, like when I was in college, or no, first year in my master's year, to get my master's degree for education. And I was student teaching. This was exactly what I ate every single day. Every single day I had a bowl of cereal for breakfast. It was either Honey Bunches of Oats or Honey Nut Cheerios. For lunch, I had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And then for dinner, I either had, this was where my variety was, I either had 2 frozen Elio's pizzas, or I had buffalo chicken tenders with spicy fries.
That's like my boy's favorite. This you just outlined my kid's
So I was eating like a teenage boy, but I was 24 years old,
Right.
and all of a sudden I wasn't exercising, and I put on 20 pounds.
Right.
And it's like, I ate the same thing every day. So the problem isn't that you want variety. The problem is you don't like the variety that you're doing. So you got to find something that like works.
So true. And one thing I always challenge clients and have is you can't have it all. So you have to decide what's most important, and when you decide once, like what is the most important thing? And for me, like, yes, I want my food to taste good. I love food. I love to eat. Me, it's got to be convenient. Like it's got to be efficient.
Yeah.
And I don't really like to cook. I do cook because I know that it's easier for me to have a balanced approach to nutrition when I do cook more and go out to dinner about once a week or so. I have to decide that like convenience is what's most important to me. And so that's what I'm going to prioritize. And so I have clients think through that when they're having challenges on this and say like, yeah, we would all love to have variety to decide in the moment to have this, but you have to decide which one of those is most important. If variety is the most important thing, you're going to have a plethora of time at your hands and ability to have a lot of foods on hand. And so then you got to decide that you're going to prioritize that. Most of the women I work with are way too busy and they eventually give up on the variety piece.
Yeah, 100%. Well, but what you talked about is you can create variety within structure. Like there's a template for this.
Right.
So like, or even I gave this example yesterday with a client. She was like, I'm struggling with variety. I'm like, you can just change slightly how you cook the same thing and it feels like a whole new meal.
For sure. So like, a template idea. I love it.
Yeah.
To like have people, have a base, but switch it up for sure. And being in New England, you may understand this, and for other people, they may not, but we don't actually have drive-thrus in my town. So I live 7 miles outside downtown Boston, but some of these older towns, they have laws from way back in the day. And so part of that is to preserve the heritage of the town. There are no drive-thrus. So I don't have a backup plan. Like when we have to get the baseball by whatever time that's not, like we would have to drive 20 to 30 minutes to get to the drive-thru to do it. So part of it is we've been forced into having to create our own convenience and cook things at home. So maybe we're a little bit fortunate in that. But again, I think it's you have to decide what's the most important and, make decisions around that. I would be nice to be able to have it all the way we want, but we can't.
No, I think that this has been a big bedrock kind of philosophy thing for me. Do you know who Ramit Sethi is? He's a author, a financial author. I Will Teach You to Be Rich. I think you would like him, actually. I have his book over here too. But he has a concept called the rich life when it comes to finances. Like you can live in a nice house, or you can travel a lot, or you can buy really nice purses, or you can eat out all the time. Like it doesn't matter what you want to spend your money on, but you probably can't spend your money on everything.
Exactly.
So you have to pick the place, like he calls them money dials, the things that you want to turn up and turn them all the way up. Like the things that bring you joy, like let it rip. But then in order to do that, you have to cut mercilessly on the things that you don't care as much about. So like he's a, you know, multi millionaire, has been on Netflix, and he drives a 2007 Honda Accord
I love it.
because he
That's what
doesn't
doesn't care about
care.
colors. Yes.
Doesn't care about cars. But he flies first class every time he goes somewhere, because and he like rents out entire resorts for his family because that's what he wants to spend his money on. He
That
rented an
that
apartment in Manhattan. And so
that
it's the fit
message
life
is
is the same
amazing.
thing.
Right. And it also is also the same message, like what he's saying in terms of finances, but also time. Like,
Yeah.
right, where you're going to spend your time, and we can't spend it everywhere. And so deciding where you're going to spend it and what is really what you're prioritizing. So I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And so when we have this, you get to choose, but you can't have everything. And you have to be okay with the like the repercussions, and like you have to be okay with the fact that you have to have a lot of food and you got to have a lot of time. And going back to the experiment thing, like just try it. And you may find that you like it, and you may find that it sucks. But that
Yeah,
doesn't mean that there's no answer for you, but you might have to pivot and try something else because you
right.
realize that that didn't matter as much to you.
Totally. The one thing I find I have to eventually like push people towards experimenting with, we'll call it,
Mm.
is the acceptance of like you have to become a planner. I don't know any
Yeah.
busy parent who figures out how to prioritize their health and to achieve these goals that doesn't have some level of planning skills and isn't
Yeah.
like planning ahead. And sometimes that's a hard one for people to accept or recognize that that whole getting home and realizing like what the heck are we gonna have for dinner.
Hmm.
Well, if you just sat down and spent
Hmm.
maybe even just 5 minutes a
Yeah.
week, like mapping out like here's what we'll probably eat. Now, is it
Hmm.
always going to go that way? No, like that's,
No.
my life is constantly going in the other direction of what we
Oh,
thought, but
yeah.
having that plan initially reduces your anxiety so you can pivot so much more quickly when it does.
Well, the baseball example is a really good one. Like, if you look at the week ahead and you go, oh, we have baseball on Thursday, we probably need to have a dinner that we can take on the road. So, like, that's not going to be the night for me to make a bolognese sauce. You know what I
Exactly.
mean? And bring it. You know, like this is going to be what can we do that's quick and convenient? It's probably a leftovers night, or you know what I mean, or something like that. Like,
Yeah. And
let me
Jeff, I
think
don't
it
mean to
through.
scare you or tell you this, but it ends up, it's every night. So
Well,
it's like,
I know that. Yeah, right. I get it. My kids are going to just be no activities. They're just going to stay
the
at
kid
home
holding
and be
activity thing,
hermits.
I think
Yeah,
after 8 is like when all of a sudden it's like
yeah.
once they get to middle school now, it's just like explodes. But yeah, it's like if there's no plan, if there's no way, of course you're going to be at the drive-through or wherever,
Hmm.
like scrambling at 9 p.m. to feed the kids, to try to
Yeah.
get them in the shower, to get them to bed before school the next day. It's of course you're going to feel totally out of control.
Well, and I think the hard part is, I think oftentimes parents, and I think you'll experience this, particularly moms, will do their best to kind of plan for or plan around the kids,
Everybody else, exactly.
and so they'll make sure the kids have a lunch that's packed and dinner and are bathed, and you know what I mean, like, but they won't bring it for themselves
Oh, I see this
all the
and
time.
time again with my clients. Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that goes back to the identity thing, and we can kind of wrap up here, which is like, I don't know, maybe we'll go a little bit deeper here, but like, I'm worth taking care of
Oh,
a little bit. I'll let you go. I feel like you
yeah.
have some thoughts.
No, for sure. I think that whole like the mommy guilt piece, right?
Hmm.
And the like caregiving role. And I know dad, parents in general, can
Yeah.
do this, but caregivers, and I also have clients who aren't parents and but are this caregiving role,
Hmm.
and whether it be for their parents or other people in their lives.
Or
Um,
even work, right? Like I'm giving care to my work or whatever it is. Yeah.
Absolutely. And they're at the bottom of that list and they think
Hmm.
they're doing the right thing by that, right? That like
Yeah.
I'm taking care of all these other people. I'm doing what I need to do, and whether that but that guilt can get so big, and is so deep that it's hard again to take action or think about where to start with it. But the thing I try to challenge, people to think about too is, people are doing that for so long. I was doing it for so long that it becomes just part of who you are. And you start to self-identify right in that way, that's your safety net, right? That's what you know. And this idea of, this other thing where like, wait a minute, what if I didn't like get the kids their food first? Or what if I worked out while the kids were on their iPad? Or, that idea seems so foreign to you that it's so hard to take action on it. But you're so safe in your own world that you just convince yourself of that. The idea, like, to actually take action, start doing something else, that's scary, right? And so I'd rather stay miserable and kind of stay where we are at the bottom of the list and taking care of everyone else, because that's safe and comfortable, because what we've been doing for so long. So again, when you experiment and start doing it and start seeing, like, I love it when I see clients like, I just let the kids watch TV, and guess what? Turned out they were fine.
Yeah.
But I'm like, they're fine. I'm like, I watched so much TV growing up, and I think I've been pretty successful. So
Yeah.
like, your kids are going to be fine, trust me. But getting them to have that experience of it and see it, and that's just how they can continue to do it. But yeah, it's there's a lot there. It's really hard.
It is. Well, and this comes back to the expectations thing. Like, what are we expecting of ourselves, and what are we feeding ourselves? So I wonder if that's some of the uncluttering is like, what are we consuming? In terms of like in our minds, like, we're going to be cluttered with what we're consuming. We're consuming a lot of different things, and so then all of those things are pinging around in our head. Like, I saw this, and those are conflicting, or I'm feeling this because I saw this person do that, or I ought to be doing this, shoulda, coulda, woulda, right? The holy trinity of regret, is what. How do we kind of filter out what we're consuming so that the things that we're consuming are aligned with who we're trying to become?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I definitely think being careful about who you follow on social media, and the things that we are seeing and being exposed to. And the comparison game can really be challenging for many of my clients. And part of our business is we share client testimonials, right, and share success stories. And I'm sure you've experienced this. That is
Yeah.
really hard for other
Yeah.
clients. And I remind them the reality of, like, this is marketing, right?
Yeah.
And I just flat out tell them that, so they
Yeah.
know it's like, I'm not lying. These are all true stories, but like, I'm not, sharing about, every single struggle or every single thing. And we're all having that. Each of us, you are having that.
Yeah.
I'm having that. All these clients are having that. Maybe we do need to do a little bit more of that, but anyways, I think staying in your own lane can be really helpful for that, so that you don't get too caught up in that.
Absolutely. Well, Lauren, we made that happen real fast in my head, but I want to be respectful of your time. But any kind of last minute things that we didn't get to, and it's no pressure if the answer is no, but I always want to make sure I give that shot.
Yeah, no, I think parents in general, or caregivers, or, I know we both work with a lot of clients in these
Mm,
categories. Um, it, it if I look back and I think about my journey, everyone's like, would you do anything different? What do you regret? This, that.
mm,
I just wish I started sooner. And,
mm,
when I have clients that come to work with me, and that, are like a 3 month old, they're just,
mm,
and, or, have toddlers, just, I am so impressed by that. And, I didn't start out that early. My kids were in their, were about 4 or 5, when I started out. And I have some clients who are starting out at 60, 65. You can start at any time, but if I would say anything, it's your time is important. You are valuable,
mm,
and you are just, taking care of yourself is just as important as taking care of everybody else. And it doesn't have to be this great, massive thing you're starting. Just start small and do
mm.
something. But you're worth it.
Really, really well said. Uh, Lauren from This Life Uncluttered, I will tag her social and put her website down in the show notes, or rather, Olivia will, because she's the best. But really appreciate you coming on, Lauren. And please do go follow. Lauren's just fantastic, and somebody who I've learned a ton watching, and so I hope this was valuable for people. And if it was for you, let her know, right? Say, hey, I listened to your episode with Jeff, and she'll probably say Jeff who, and then you can say Jeff Delzell, and she'll be like, okay, that's great. And but it was great having you on, and hope to do it again soon.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
You got it.